So after the 2010 season, Coach Fisher promoted me to director of football operations, which is essentially like the general manager. So I'm barely 30, $300 million football organization. But I had other career aspirations, but I felt like this is something I needed to do. So I was like, Coach, would you name me director of sports science as well? I was like, yeah, you can call yourself whatever you want. That job didn't exist. So during our vacation, I had gotten asked by a new startup franchise Aussie Rules football team. So imagine a new franchise NFL team. It's that big down there, 100,000 seat stadiums, $1 billion TV contracts, to come and do an information exchange. I went down there and I learned about the emerging world of sports science and athlete wearables. They were tracking athletes in games and using that data to adjust everything about training, how they were swapping out rotations. It was also happening in European soccer. I come back, I literally bring a case back of 12 of these tracking units, and there was no script for this. I'm duct taping them to the pads of our players. After the first week, the coach comes to me, Jim was like, what are we gonna do with this? No, and that was not good. So I ended up hiring a former NASA propulsion engineer to help me derive meaning from this data. And once we were able to...
Wait a second, why NASA propulsion engineer?
Well, they had just cut the space program.
Okay.
And his dad was a donor and called up to the school and said, hey, my son was an engineer for NASA. President Obama just cut the space program. Do you have a need? I'm like, yes. Okay. So we called him Rocket Man, and he literally was in a closet. And I was like, this is exactly what I need. It was raw telemetry. The UI was terrible. So he's like, perfect, I can do that. I mean, we have GPS data, we have accelerometers, gyroscopes,
I see.
magnetometers.
So this is a guy that is used to looking at streams of data and making sense out of it. And you're like, I've got all this data coming in. I need someone to kind of connect the dots.
Yes.
And you're my guy for that.
Yeah, okay. So I was like, I know what I'm looking for. I just don't have the time or the ability right now to do this. So when we were able to, we reverse engineered the game of football. Nobody had quantified. Think about this. Millions of dollars going into these games, hundreds of millions of dollars, and nobody had ever quantified the game. So they were just like throwing darts at a dartboard blindfolded. So once we were able to say, this is what the game is, this is how we're training our athletes, there was a major disconnect. Also, we were playing about the equivalent of 5 games a week before we got to Saturday, and our guys were just worn out. We had amazing coaches and a ridiculously loaded roster. We implemented a bunch of changes, kind of unified people around some things. We had an 88% reduction in injury the next year. And when the season, we won a championship, and then the NFL flew in. They're like, all right, what's going on? And it opened a multi-billion-dollar market for sports wearables. It went everywhere.